Welcome. My name is Alison Clark, and I'm a member of the Ontario Public Library Association's Research and Evaluation Committee. The committee has been doing a lot of thinking about the data that's involved in planning to go fines-free and understanding how going fines-free affects various activities that happen in the system. One of the things that we looked at was understanding how you might know whether or not going fines-free makes a difference in the number of items that are overdue and how long they're overdue. So this video and accompanying slide deck will show you a way to figure that out for yourself and see if it helps you make your decisions in going fines-free. So the data that you see here on the screen, I pulled from our ILS, which happens to be Polaris. And you'll see I've got the item barcode, I have the collection name, the checkout date, just in case I'm interested. I have the due date and item status description. So you may or may not need the collection name. If you are planning on doing, say, a pilot test for children's items only, you may find the collection name helpful in being able to break out the difference between the children's items and the adult items. So all of these, this information I happened to pull on September 9th. And I pulled items that were due in the 30-day period before September 9th. So the first thing I want to do is understand how many days each item is overdue. So I'm going to start a new column here, and I'm just going to call this how many days overdue, question mark. And I'll just resize this column here by double clicking in between the columns. So there's a handy little formula that's called date DIF, date difference. And it's going to be the difference between this date and this date, which is the date that I pulled the information. Another comma and then a little D inside these quotation marks. So we should see that, in fact, yes, this item is already 30 days overdue. Its due date was August the 10th, and it is now September the 9th, so it is 30 days overdue. So this happens to be a fairly large data set. If I scroll down here, you'll see it goes on for quite some time. There's over 6,400, almost 6,500 rows here. So obviously it would take a while to just do a manual cut and paste. So we're going to get a little fancy and have this formula populate all the way down to that very last row. And we're going to do this by making what's called an absolute reference, because we want every row here to refer back to this September 9th here. So what we're going to do is put a $sign in front of the G and the 1. So you'll notice that the date that we're referring to is in this column G here, G and 1. So now that we've put a $sign in front of the column and the row, when we copy this all the way down, and I'm going to copy it by putting my cursor in this bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see how it changes from kind of a chunky cross to a very narrow cross. And if you double click, look at that, it copies the formula all the way down. So let's look at row 18. And in row 18, you can see up here in this area, you can see the formula that's in that cell, and there's the date DIF, and it's comparing D18 with this G1 here. And you can see it goes all the way down. So that's how many days everything is overdue. So the next thing we're going to do is something very exciting called a pivot table. It's one of my favorite things. And we're going to choose first all the information we want in the pivot table. So I'm going to click on the column here and drag it all the way over to F. I want all of these columns in my pivot table. I don't need this here because that's not really a column, that's just sort of a reference. So you'll see all of these columns are highlighted. And then I'm going to insert, and I'm going to insert a pivot table, which is right here. So the little pivot table wizard comes up and you'll see that the data that we've highlighted is already there. And then it asks you where you want the pivot table report to be placed. And the default is new worksheet. And I usually like to use a new worksheet because then if I don't like the pivot table, I can just always delete it and it keeps it separate from the original pull of data. So we're going to say, okay. And then it's going to take us to a new sheet here. And we now have our blank pivot table on the left. And over here on the right, we have, here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Over here on the right, we have our pivot table field list. This is our pivot table wizard here. And you'll see up top, you'll see, oh, wait a minute, these names look familiar. There's our item barcode, our collection name, the checkout date, due date, our item status, and now how many days overdue, which was that new column that we created. So what we want to do here is we want to figure out how many items are overdue by how many days. So I'm going to take this how many days overdue and I'm going to click on it and drag it down into the row labels. And you'll see here, I'll make it a little bit bigger. Now we're going to make this, we'll make it 14. And you'll see here in our pivot table that we've got 1, 2, 5, 6. These are the number of days that items could be overdue, all the way up to 30 days. You'll remember that the data I pulled was a maximum of 30 days overdue. So now we want to find out how many items. So we're going to go back over here to our field list and we're going to choose item barcode and we're going to click and drag it down into the values. And you can see here in values, the default is to count things. So it's going to count all of the barcodes that were overdue by 1 day, by 2 days, by 5 days, by 6 days. And so you can see that it is now calculated out of those 6,493 rows of data. You can see what the breakdown is. So it's pretty easy to see that most of the items are overdue in this top section here. And if we go down to, getting closer to 30 days, you can see there's fewer items that are overdue here. So that's a really quick way for us to see not only how many items in total are currently overdue, but also, how long they're overdue. So what if you were doing, say, fines free for children's? And in that way, you could take the collection name here and you could filter on it. So we're going to drag this into report filter and you'll see that it pops up here. And so right now it's everything. We've got everything in there. But if I click on it and select multiple items here, so let's select everything that has children in it. And you can see that this search results here are now showing all of our collections that have children in the title. And I'm going to say, okay. And you can see that the numbers change here. So there's fewer numbers. So out of that 6,400, 3,900 were apparently part of the children's collection. So, and you can see the same thing here, that most of our items are overdue probably in that first week and maybe a little bit into the second week, and then it starts to trail off as items get returned. So what if you wanted to see, instead of the number, what if you also wanted to see the percentage of the total that are overdue? So what we're going to do is take this item barcode again and click and drag it down into values. And so you can see, Okay, we've got exactly the same thing. We're counting the barcode here, we're counting the barcode there. But in the second one, we're going to click on this little arrow to the right here, and we're going to go to value field settings. And there's another little window that pops up here. And you can see it's telling us what we already know, that right now we're counting the values. But if we click on this little tab here, show values as, we can see there's currently no calculation. It's just counting things for us. So what I would like to see instead is a percentage of the total. So when we say, okay, watch what happens here. Oh, this now turns into a percentage. So you can see that that 511 items that are overdue by 1 day is almost 13% of the total. And if you scroll down to the bottom of this little chart here, you can see that the 23 items that are overdue by 30 days are only 0.58% of the total. So then if you wanted to have a little summation of things here, you could do a quick little addition here. So sum with this little formula. And you could do the 1 to 7 days here. So that's your first week, right? And so look at that, 53.77% of the items are only overdue by 1 week, which means that, you know, the rest of that 50%, the other half, the other 46.3% are overdue up to 30 days. So what you might want to do then, if you're preparing to go fines free, you might want to collect this information in advance. You might want to collect it for a few months, in fact, before you decide to go fines free. You might want to do it, you know, once a month, different time, so that you can start to gather a baseline and you can start to see if these things look different every time. If you collect this kind of data for 4 months, you collect 4 different times or 6 different times, things like that, and the numbers are always similar. You know, you always have maybe 3,500 to 4,500 children's items that are overdue in this particular example, which happens to be from Brampton Library. And, you know, then you start to create a baseline. So you start to look for patterns. And if you collect it, you know, maybe 4 times over 4 different months, and you see that the numbers are very similar, then you can feel comfortable that you've actually got a baseline to work with. So you collect it before you start your pilot, and then you start your pilot, and then you start to collect data after your pilot as well. It might take some time to see results, or you might not see any change at all. People are very consistent in the patterns of what they do. So you might see, in fact, that it's a very similar number of items that are overdue, or, you know, it's a similar percentage of items that are overdue in that first week. But these are the types of data points that you can collect to understand how going fines free might be affecting what's happening and what your customers are doing. So the accompanying slide deck has screenshots of all of these things, so you can try it for yourself if this is something that you want to do. The committee also put a few names on there with some different ILS options for you. And you're certainly welcome to reach out if you give this a try and you run into trouble and you need a little bit of help. Absolutely let us know. So hopefully this was helpful to you, and you can give it a try.